Howdy, it's your boy, FPS Kid. This is going to be an anomaly, not only in the fact that I actually uploaded something, but that I also bring a slap fight into a video. So I've been getting back into Far Cry 5 recently, and having a lot of fun and been listening to the soundtrack. Went on to a music video for one of the tracks in it and noticed I had a reply to a comment I made about a year back. Here goes. Okay, I want to set something straight. If Far Cry 5 ever made you wonder if you're the bad guy, you need to toughen your resolve. You're fighting a torturous cult that drug and mutilate people and animals. One of their leaders is a serial killer, another uses CIA brainwashing, and one straight up brainwashed into thinking she is another person entirely. You are the good guy, and the only reason you lose and are quote-unquote wrong is because Ubisoft sucks at writing. And the wonderful big-brained response to it was, or maybe you might need to look at things from a broader perspective. Ambiguity can be a lot of things and doesn't have to be you wondering if you are actually the bad guy cut and dry, but can be more just you starting to question or think about things. Someone else can be the bad guys while you, the player, still doesn't do what's right neither. I decided to respond to this long dead comment with a now deleted reply. You can thank YouTube's retarded comment moderation bot for that. But it said, "What does the deputy canonically and willingly do that is morally wrong?" And this wall of text was the response. I skimmed it, saw a bunch of snark, and "but they're victims too" bullshit, and hit him with the classic Duke Nukem response. I was gonna leave it at that and get back to my busy schedule of humping my John Seed body pillow, but then this redditor's spiteful little mind couldn't help but puke out some snarky dogshit response.
You literally asked me a question, which I definitely answered with plenty of arguments. Hilarious how you say I'm wrong without providing anything remotely close to any kind of argument. But then again, it all comes down to the same. Like your comment also shows, the player who can't see the ambiguity in the games are always very simplistic and very low intellectual players who can't or won't look into things too deeply, which of course is why you don't get it. In the end, it requires to look at things a little more nuanced than a simple-minded FPS kid perspective. I'm so gonna get so much karma after this.
So, I'm gonna sit through his college dissertation and prove that the deputy wasn't in the right. The writing of Far Cry 5 is dumb, and that me and my boyfriend fucked his wife. Before we get into the examples presented, I think we should answer an important question. What is morality, and what is moral or immoral? Unfortunately, morality is a hotly debated topic with many different lines drawn in the sand. I will approach this from my sense of morality. I would say my moral values are very American and fit well with such a video, since Far Cry 5 takes place here. Although I have no doubt that this ass will take issue with my ideas of morality. I am of the belief that actions such as killing in self-defense are justified. Pacifism is a good ideal, but actions of force are sometimes needed to prevent further harm. That killing someone or something to end needless suffering is a moral good. That while someone being a victim of bad actions is sad, if they in turn victimize someone else with no remorse, they should be treated the same as the victimizer. That there is a moral gray area, and that if the practicality of such an action leads to a better outcome for your group or community than a wider morality action, you take it. That morality is not a great factor in dire straits such as a war or purge, as the action of war and other such catastrophes are innately immoral, and strong actions can lead to better results. specifically for innocent populations. And that the law is not the arbiter of such morality, namely due to it being fickle. In one state, you're imprisoned for killing an armed man who attacks you in your own house, after breaking and entering, on top of that, while in others, the average civilian has the authority to assist police in a shootout. To hold him and myself to this standard, I'll keep a little tally of point presented as to whether or not it's refuted. In this Redditor's argument, he says the points presented can represent arguments that are morally, logistically, and legally wrong. I'll put more stock into the first two, but I'm confident I can disprove the legal arguments too. As Joseph, the cult, are preparing for the collapse the wrong way, Deputy also stops them and tackles the situation in a wrong manner from many different perspectives, instead of taking the secret ending and leaving to plan a better approach, which would ultimately be the right thing for anyone not blinded by FPS Kids logic, aka saying is the right thing to feed a war which leads to a lot of casualties and destruction on both sides. For those of you who don't know, the player character, the Deputy, is often referred to as Rook. This is because they are a rookie cop, most definitely a new hire, and for those of you who have never had a job, new hires don't have the authority to suggest plans of action, especially in government positions like, say, law enforcement, looking to arrest a dangerous criminal. Now, I do agree that leaving and coming back with the National Guard or some similar force is a smart idea. However, with the way that the ending is framed, along with the actions of characters like Agent Huntley and the federal monitoring being so obvious that Joseph mentions it in the Word of Joseph, it's very likely that Whitehorse would be denied access to the National Guard. Hell, the fact that they never appeared during the Reaping when the feds knew the cult was going to do something is proof that the leave ending leaves Hope County in peggy hands. In Far Cry 6, the cult are still around 3 years later with an online presence. Presumably, it's the walkaway timeline, as the other two leave not much of the cult left, not even the Heralds. Even with everything stated, how was Rook supposed to know that their appearance would lead to the Reaping? They, for all intent and purposes, are a McDonald's cashier getting blamed for a gang war because they shorted a Crip one nugget on their order on the wrong day. Firstly, blowing up some well-supplied bunkers for no logical reason, instead of just securing and keeping such very useful underground places intact. Clearly, burying and smothering a lot of dead or alive people, including prisoners, who didn't get discovered or rescued. These bunkers are furthermore stocked with food, water, and supplies. All kinds of useful stuff, a lot of it taken from said county, and instead of keeping the bunkers to fetch all of these things back out, we just blow it all up for no reason. Why care if the Peggies are stealing to prepare for the collapse if we and the Resistance doesn't care about blowing it all up in the end anyway? And yeah, the last factor that, considering the end that the collapse comes, they ultimately would have been a great factor in saving and helping a lot of people in the end, both in terms of food, water, and resources. They now contains, but also just the big space to surely secure a lot of people in a more comfortable way even. There is absolutely no reason to blow them up like this, and it is just stupid and illogical all around. Now, I will agree that blowing up the bunkers wasn't the best idea. If I ever got around to doing a full-on rewrite, it would be a point of change. However, you also have to consider the circumstances of the bunker missions. Let's take John's bunker, for example. John's bunker is a population center. It would more than likely hold a large minority of the cult, say 4/9. The only lore tidbit I know of as to the real size of the cult comes from the box of the Father's Calling, which states it has 3,000 members. Since a lot of the cult is out and about in the world, let's put an estimate that about half the cult is busy outside the bunker, while half is busy inside, maintaining it, storing things, indoctrinating prisoners, etc. That would mean that in all missions inside the bunker, it has a population of roughly 500 to 600 members. To clear out the bunker when you are given the chance, that be after killing John would take an extraordinary amount of time. When you arrive, the cult is already attempting to lock everything down. Joey Hudson says as much. We know the cult's proclivity to executing prisoners as shown during gameplay, so in the event a long, drawn-out bunker clearing were to happen, they would more than likely go cell to cell gunning people down. Now, you also have to present the point of prisoners being potentially buried in the exploded bunker. But, for that, you have to remember that Joey Hudson is on the cams that survey the entire bunker, and deliberately guides you to freeing all of the prisoners in the bunker. The only reason why it seems like you're leaving people behind is because of the Skyrim problem. The tech isn't advanced enough to show that many NPCs at once, nor is the company particularly motivated enough to attempt it. As for other bunkers, Faith's bunker is a toxicological hazard. It's only bearable to the deputy due to the constant exposure of the explicitly harmful bliss toxin. As for prisoners, Faith's bunker is only home to devoted cultists and angels, who are stated to canonically be unsalvageable. And as for Jacob's bunker, the deputy didn't destroy that one. That was Pratt, who only did so as a response to abuse by the cult. And as for trying to hold Rook accountable for deaths that could have been prevented in the collapse by sparing the bunkers, how the hell were they supposed to know? Sure, the cult and Joseph say the world is going to end, but they have been saying that canonically for about a decade. Countless people have been saying the world is going to end for time immemorial. They're supposed to just believe it this time? You may counter by bringing up the announcements on the in-game Resistance radio, reporting on stuff outside of Hope County. But two things. For one, that is a plot hole. It was stated by Dutch in the very beginning that there are no signals getting in or out of the valley, so that means you should not be able to learn about this. Second, the radio, as well as other forms of news media, have always made it seem like the world was going to end. Remember in 2016 when people were told that Donald Trump being elected would lead to World War III? I do. I was one of the suckers who believed that. Remember in 2017 when people believed that we were about to have a second civil war? Or when they said that we would have one in 2018? Or 2019? Yeah, the escalations are dire. But who hears that for years and genuinely believes the world is going to end? I'll tell you who. Tim Pool. And you don't want to be Tim Pool. Also, on the more moral aspect, just murdering Faith, a barely an adult, young brainwashed girl crying for mercy, rather than getting her out of this mess and helping her, is clearly, especially considering how she literally begs for mercy and attempts to surrender at the end, is just a young girl, not far from being a teenager, hooked on this bliss, who never really got a chance to really know better than this. We straight up murder a confused and brainwashed young girl, again barely an adult, who directly screams and cries for help, rejects to help her reaching for us, and leaves her to bleed out / drown in a river, completely ignoring her pleading and crying without trying, hold, or help her and attempt to get her out of this like any good person would prefer with someone like her, considering who she is. What a hero we got here. She literally attempts to surrender, so it is not only our job as an officer of the law to always prefer non-lethal options and helping her, but also just any good person would also prefer to help and get someone like her out of this mess, especially considering how young she is. Clearly hooked and wiped on this drug herself, and ultimately shows a lot of redeeming qualities and inner struggle. To everything, it is clear she is brainwashed, conditioned, and molested into something that a young girl in a vulnerable state she had little consciousness and zero intentions of becoming, and she even tried to escape at some point but got lost in the same drug that we are supposed to help her from. But I guess none of it matters to the deputy because they just kill without second thoughts. Again, what a hero. No. At no point does Faith attempt to surrender to the deputy. Her quote-unquote begging for mercy was a backstory dumping during her boss fight, which can happen as she is actively attacking you / sending Yosef Mengele level war crimes known as angels to kill you. Her reaching out for the deputy at the end of it was more than likely Faith attempting to manipulate the player, as if she grabbed them, she would have attempted to weave another intricate tale or some bullshit, as she is one to do. As for leaving her to bleed out in the river, it's pretty clear that she was dead before she hit the water, with the unchanging facial expression, slow sinking. Pretty much since the cutscene starts, she is fatally wounded. Also, no, she was not barely an adult. Faith, otherwise known as Jessica Grant, was 17 when she joined the cult. The cult entered the region 9 years before the events of the game. It is unknown exactly when Faith joined, but it is known there were 2 Faiths before her, with the first disappearing rather quickly. It is also unknown how long the second Faith was around, but I would say it wasn't long, as it's pretty common for Resistance members to refer to her as the Little Sister, possibly due to not knowing her adopted status, which could be due to her having been Faith a while before the cult's details were widespread. While we don't know for sure, it is a common estimate to put her age somewhere between 23 and 26. In a few days, I will be 22. I am fucking far from a teenager. All of my high school acquaintances are too. She's not almost a teenager. She wears a childish persona, yeah, but it's just that, a persona. When it slips, you see a much more serious person. And yes, while she was manipulated and drugged and possibly raped, that does not excuse the things she's done or the willingness with which she's done them. Let's take the angels, for example. The angels are human beings who are drugged with bliss until they are mentally stuck in its weird pocket dimension, completely lost in artificial happiness while their bodies are mutilated and used for slave labor. There are hundreds of these fuckers. While some were cultists who consented to it, the majority are civilians and resistance members who explicitly do not want it. Yet, despite having an outright supernatural control over the substance and those influenced by it, as seen with Marshall Burke, she only perpetuates the slavery. Faith Seed unironically repealed the 13th Amendment. But back on the Marshall. Cameron Burke is one of the few examples of someone who loves being in the bliss. And even though he comes out of it, it's clear he wants to go back. So what does Faith do with that? She makes him kill the kindest, most innocent member of the Resistance, tear down the prison defenses, and then forces him to kill himself, all the while she is taking very visible pleasure in it. And depending on how you interpret the bliss, she may still be alive, as her will is exerted through it after she dies, by having Sheriff Whitehorse attempt suicide out of spite for the deputy. Is that the actions of someone who wants to change? No, it's not. It's the actions of a manipulator who kills people who have done nothing to her personally, just to hurt other people. It is the actions of someone who, instead of bettering themselves and actually taking steps to change while that matters, uses the powers they're given to play God in their own little world. Put simply, Faith is an abuser. It's a case of hurt people, but she hurts people so severely and so willingly with such malice that she needs to be punished for it. And she only shows regret when the actions she took literally lead to her own death. Her dying before she got the chance to change was her choice. It'd be like trying to excuse a pedophile molesting children because they were molested as a kid. Once you cross certain boundaries, your personal abuse is no longer a factor. You're just a bad person. The deputy takes part in a mission killing cows with fire and reapers because he needs the testicles for an annual festival. Very necessary in the situation, I see. This is a completely optional side quest, but since it is a mission and therefore possibly canon, I will give you that is a morally wrong point. Animal cruelty is cruel. The deputy teams up with actual criminals from the resistance and flames angels, actual victimized people, while freaking out to disco music. This is in reference to Sharky. He is a gun for hire in the game and a personal favorite of mine. During his loyalty mission, he has you join in the killing of angels to burn baby burn. Sharky is a criminal, however, as of the events of the game, it can be presumed that he is a free man, as he mentions having a parole officer. This is only as much of an issue as you personally make it. Do you believe that ex-cons are worthy of the same trust given to regular people? If so, then it isn't a mark, but if you do, then it is. I personally think his aiding of the resistance is evidence enough that he is a good man. As to the killing of angels using a flamethrower, in the game, angels do not feel pain, and the flamethrowers kill quicker than they do in our world, so I consider it morally gray, but still putting them out of their suffering, considering they are incapable of being cured. Chasing a dude and purposely shoots him lethally and canonically picks up his body to unnecessarily throw it around. Unnecessary brutalism and wrath is not a good guy at all. The dude in question is John Seed. Directly prior to this, he commences a hostile takeover of a town called Falls End, in which he holds hostage, tortures, and disfigures residents while they are being held hostage, including the deputy, Nick Rye, and Pastor Jerome. The deputy and co fight back. He escapes town and pilots a combat plane with intent to harm several people. You shoot it down, either killing him in the air or following him to the ground where you pursue him. It should be noted that there is legal precedent for law enforcement being allowed to kill a fleeing suspect if the suspect were doing such things as taking hostages, attempting murder, or having already committed murder. The throwing around of the body is in reference to the fact that after he dies, you have the option to mess with his ragdoll corpse. However, it is not required, and therefore I do not consider it to be canon. It'd be like saying the deputy canonically attempted to rocket jump, because I made mine attempt to when I was bored. Takes part in voter suppression at a street corner and literally kills people just for fun, and no, sorry for that cutoff. I think he got lost in the anger of someone on the internet disagreeing with his take on a shallowly written 7-year-old game and forgot to finish it. It is a reference to a mission in which Herc Drebman Sr. employs the deputy to improve voter opinion of him by gunning down cult members in a turret-mounted jeep repping his campaign. I would not consider this voter suppression, as the cult does not participate in local politics, outside of John using his lawyer background to swindle people's property away from them, and defend members in court pre-reaping. I would in fact consider this a public service, as the deputy killing the cult members means there are less of them around to victimize the locals. The only moral wrong here is the fact that it's very obvious Drebman Sr. is a piece of shit. Again, indiscriminately murder a lot of indoctrinated people who are brainwashed or tortured into it as well, or people who are only with Joseph to stay alive or be saved. Definitely not only self-defense neither. Yes, a lot of the cult is indoctrinated. However, no member of the cult, with one exception, ever takes steps to oppose the horrific actions of the cult. Every member you come across will attack you on sight with intent to kill. Not just to the deputy, but to resistance members and civilians, including the kidnapping, torture, and execution of civilians and resistance, the desecration of the dead and their graves, the mistreatment of animals, unlawful seizure and destruction of property, among many other crimes that, may I remind you, were all started by the cult. Not the deputy, not the resistance, not the county, the cult. The one exception I mentioned earlier is a cult VIP member in the Holland Valley who realizes how insane things are getting. You rescue him from the cult at Silver Lake Trailer Park, in which you clear the place out, locate him and hold off a siege, after which you carry him to a resistance boat where he will be taken away to safety. This guy, who bought in so hard he became a VIP of the cult, saw their actions and said, I can't tolerate this. He defected, even though he knew how severe it was and despite his entrenchment. If he can, anyone could have, but they didn't. And instead, they will always, without fail, fight you to the death. You can feel pity for them, but they choose to be the enemy. And as for the accusations of killings outside of self-defense, the killing of cult in defense of others is a moral right, as usually those occur in situations where they are inflicting death or suffering on innocent people. And if you want to take it even further to examples of them just standing around, that is also okay, as Hope County is effectively a war zone, and based on all actions by the cult, it can be comfortably assumed every one of them is a combatant, and in such cases it is morally sound to kill them. Blows up a lot of useful buildings, hotel and water treatment plant, and things which could have been reformed and used as well. Yes, those are buildings that could have been used, but at the time they were under firm cult control. Under the assumption that once the resistance has won, those facilities could be rebuilt in time, but at the time of their destruction, they were an indoctrination and mind control center under heavy guard and being used to pollute the environment respectfully. They posed great dangers and needed to be immediately dealt with. It's common during wartime to destroy important structures such as hospitals and power plants because in the meantime, it denies such advantages to the enemy and can be easily replaced once things are over. It was done in World War II after all, and nobody complains about that, do they? Blows up a statue and burns a book at the top, so professional. The action was twofold, destroying enemy morale and boosting allied morale. We are actively seeking to kill people and build up a resistance and take part in an anarchist resistant missions as a guerrilla fire, and story-wise it is not likely we only kill people in self-defense, as we are the one who on the offensive leading the resistance seek to kill. That's war. And it's not an anarchist movement. The resistance is highly patriotic. Each one displays an American flag somewhere with the noted disdain of nations in anarchy. It would be a wild conflict of interest. And as for seeking to kill, that is also moral in this case. The cult kicked things off by enacting the Reaping, in which they targeted the community in just about every immoral way you can imagine. To put it into perspective, imagine you're in Latin America, the local cartel comes along and just starts executing and kidnapping people left and right, burning homes and stealing shit. If the community grabs their guns and starts hunting cartel members, would you say they are monsters? That they're going too far or morally blackened? No, they are resisting an oppressive force. The deputy actively feeds a war and never attempts to do anything else, which leads to a lot of casualties and destruction on both sides. What are you, fucking stupid? What can they do? Talk it out? Trying to get everyone to sing Kumbaya and hold hands? The cult believes the world is ending and that every act they inflict must happen to save the souls of the region. And the resistance are filled with burning hatred for the cult due to years they've been making the county suffer on top of the outright hostile takeover. Get real. If the arrest didn't happen, they would have eventually attempted to kill each other, reaping or not. It would be like the Troubles in Ireland. And the casual stuff, steal and pillage from local businesses and personal properties, and indiscriminately kills animals in various and brutal ways, steals vehicles. A lot of people from those properties are either dead or don't care, since the things you steal help the resistance. It's effectively borrowing. As for the animals, the only canon animal kills are stuff like judge animals, which is a mercy killing, as they're all suffering, or the accidental killing of the cows in Zip Kupka's mission. As for random animal attacks, none are canon, all are self-defense, and well, hunting is hunting, with all meat and fur sold directly going to feeding the resistance and civilians. You might take issue with my stance on taking resources from the houses, but hey, I never had one guy come up to me in my game and be like, hey, why'd you take that ammo out of my house, you fucking dick? No, they don't fucking care. They know it's going to a good cause, and they support it. As for the vehicles, again, all are either from dead people, commandeered by the living who willingly give them up, gifts from allies or from cult members who more than likely attacked first. Plus, law enforcement does sometimes commandeer vehicles in dire situations. I think the raping is dire enough for any amount of commandeerings. Besides, if it bothers you that much, you always have the option to just buy vehicles. If one is not blinded by FPS logic, it is clear that the deputy isn't actually righteous in their way of doing things, and that is regardless of what Joseph and the cult is, or if Joseph is right or not, and is clear that this is the point with this.
At the end of the day, and I really hope you internalize this, you got blown the fuck out. And it's not because your points are bad, it's because your points are bad and you're stupid.
You're fat.